So we're going to be wrapping up with the commands next week, okay? So this week and next week, and then it'll be Mother's Day already. Hard to believe that, isn't it? This year's just flying by. As I said this morning, we'll be looking post-resurrection. We're going to be in the book of John, chapter 21. And it's an account that is only found in John. All right, it's not in Matthew, Mark, or Luke. It's only found in John. And it's an interaction Jesus had with the 7 disciples, 7 of them. We're going to focus on verse 15 to 19 this morning. Kelly has it on the screen. I remember to give it to her ahead of time. Sometimes I forget that. But if you have your Bible open and you just look at the title of this passage, you're probably going to see something along the lines of Jesus and Peter, something like that. It might say Jesus reinstates Peter, Jesus forgives Peter, might be one. Something along those lines, Jesus and Peter. Now, we have to think, what do we know about Jesus and Peter up to this point? What's the elephant in the room for them? Yep, their relationship was kind of broken, wasn't it? Yeah, because Peter had denied him. If we just were to flip back to chapter 18, Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside at the door. So the other disciple who was known to the high priest went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are one of this man's disciples, aren't you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter was also with them, standing and warming himself. Now, Peter was standing and warming himself, so they said to him, "You also are one of his disciples, aren't you?" He denied it and said, "I'm not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. So I kind of condensed that a little bit. But that story of Peter denying Jesus, that's quite the relationship changer, isn't it? We've probably all been there at one time or another. I hope not necessarily to this extent. I hope you didn't give up on a friend when he was being murdered. But we've probably treated friends in ways that we shouldn't have. Maybe we've been treated that way, right? Either way, we can understand the awkwardness that derives from that situation. And especially at such an early encounter. Since his resurrection, this is only the second or the third time that Peter and Jesus have interacted. And you can kind of just imagine that awkwardness that Peter must feel. That's kind of the emotion that we have going on here. Just an awkward, not black and white, just kind of gray situation. And there's an added component to it too, because as we know, emotions themselves aren't black and white. And there's just a lot that is unknown here. Now, what happens earlier in this chapter? You remember? Where are we at? Dave and Wayne? This ought to be fresh in your minds. They were fishing, right? The guys went out fishing. Well, why were they fishing? It wasn't the walleye opener or trout season, okay? It wasn't necessarily just a relaxing fishing trip either. But last week we read from Matthew's account of the resurrection. And do you recall what Jesus told Mary Magdalene to say to the disciples? He said, "Go tell the disciples to go to Galilee and wait." Well, planning a fishing trip isn't exactly waiting, is it? I mean, there's some waiting involved, but that's not what Jesus was meaning. Peter was the one that planned the trip. He announced to everybody, "I'm going fishing." And while that's not the worst idea, I'm not saying I wouldn't have said it. You have to think, Remember, Jesus said, go tell the disciples to wait. Could it be that Peter had in his mind that maybe those instructions didn't apply to him anymore? Remember, old Pete had done some things that kind of made him unfit to follow Jesus. He tried doing it for 3 years, and for a while there, he looked really good, right? I mean, think about it. He was pretty bold. Right before they took Jesus, he pulls out his sword and cuts a guy's ear off. But once the rubber actually hit the road, he cracked, didn't he? Once he was probed, just simple questions. Are you one of his followers? He said no. And not just no, but he cursed him in doing so. This was all after he had promised Jesus that he would never leave him, even to the point of death. Well, that kind of disqualifies somebody from being part of that team, wouldn't you think? So he probably does some thinking and figures, well, if I can't be one of them anymore, I might as well get out the nets and go back to fishing. Because there's probably no way he can go back to fishing for men. So the fellows are out fishing, catching nothing, when Jesus shows up again, right? After Jesus once again miraculously provides an abundance of fish, Peter realizes who it is, and this is kind of where his emotions get into it. He jumps into the sea and he runs to the shore to see Jesus. I don't know why I said shore and sea in the same sentence. That's hard to say. He jumps into the sea and runs to the shore to see Jesus. I need to rewrite that one. But just as he's doing that, Peter's mind, as we know, always outruns, his body always outruns his mind, kind of like mine. And this is probably where things begin to get a little awkward or get more awkward, because he runs to meet Jesus, but you got to remember they're kind of still in that state where things just aren't quite the same as what they were. I think this would have been a joyous but pretty awkward breakfast, wouldn't you think? I would have most certainly thought so. That verse 15 says, when they finished that breakfast, and it's nice that Jesus waited until he got to eat, but I'm sure Peter's stomach was tight that whole time. Jesus said to Simon Peter, he said, Simon, son of John. Do you know what Jesus is saying here? He's saying something I don't like to hear. That's when I hear Andrew Jordan Gunlock. Yep. That, when I hear my full name, most likely means I'm in trouble. At the very least, something serious is being discussed, neither of which I really like. All right? Jesus doesn't call him Simon Peter, which was his nickname of sorts, but he uses his full title, Simon, son of John. That's because there's a serious conversation that's about to be had. Jesus says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Do you love me more than these? Now, I've said this before, so it isn't going to surprise you, but sometimes English just doesn't cut it. It really doesn't. That's one reason I like to use the Amplified version of the Bible. It just helps to fill in some of those gaps that English misses on translation. See, we read that sentence, do you love me more than these? And we read Peter's reply of, you know I love you. Okay, and in our minds we see, do you love? Yes, I love. Makes sense, right? But here's what's missed in translation. When Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? He uses the Greek word agape. That's a word probably most of us have heard, right? Agape love. Sacrificial love. Jesus says, do you agape me? Well, stop and think. What's an example of sacrificial love? Jesus dying on a cross, maybe? All right? So Jesus who knows exactly what sacrificial love is, says to him, "Do you love me sacrificially? Do you love me more than these?" Now, the English translation for these is actually these. It gets that one right, all right? So he could have been asking one of probably three things. Do you sacrificially love me more than these other guys do? Do you sacrificially love me more than you love these other guys? Or he could have been saying, do you sacrificially love me more than these things? The boat, the fish, his occupation, everything that goes with it. Essentially, he's asking, would you sacrifice all of this for me? What does Peter reply with? He says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Now, nobody's reading a Greek Bible here this morning, right? I didn't think so. But if you were, okay, you would see that Peter doesn't reply with, "Yes, I agape love you. I love you sacrificially." He says, "I love you, phileo." Now, that word is brotherly love, right? Philadelphia. We've talked about this before. It's basically the love that he had for the rest of the disciples, like a group of close guy friends would have. Now, if you don't think there's a difference between I love you sacrificially and I love you like a brother, go tell your wife that, all right? And then when you wake up sometime next week, you come and tell me how that went, all right? Yet Jesus, he replies, he says, "Feed my lambs." Now, I've tried to look into this command and the other three that will come with it that are very similar. I can't find much about it. To me, as we'll see, they're each just a wee bit different. And I would think that there's a reason that Jesus said three different but similar things. What I'm thinking here is that Jesus is kind of working up to something greater. He's saying, "Oh, okay, you love me like a brother. We'll start there. Then I need you to go feed the lambs." I'm assuming, if anybody knows different, you tell me, but I'm assuming that like calves, probably baby lambs are pretty easy to feed. If you go to a dairy farm, you'll see the kids and the grandkids, they're the ones that are out feeding the calves because it's kind of fun, it's easy to do. So I'm thinking that lambs are probably no different. And Jesus is saying to Peter, all right, we're going to start somewhere. Do something simple. All right? Do something small. Peter probably thinks that that's what his job's going to be. I'm just going to be the one feeding the lambs. Until, verse 16, Jesus said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John," once again, his full name, "do you love me?" Do you want to guess what Jesus asked him in Greek? Agape. Do you love me sacrificially, unconditionally? It's the same as what he had asked before. Deja vu continues, though, because Peter gives the same response. He says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you like a brother." Once again, unconditionally and like a brother. Not necessarily the same thing, wasn't even the same word. Not the definition Jesus was looking for. Why do you suppose that Peter's looking, or that he's replying in that way? Saying, "Lord, I love you like a brother." Maybe is it because they know the truth? That Peter had opportunities to love Jesus sacrificially, and he didn't? I think that might be the case. They both knew the truth. Yet Jesus replies to him again, despite all of that, and he says, "Tend my sheep." First it was feeding lambs, now we're working up to the sheep. And like I said, I believe it's safe to say here that the responsibility is slowly building. Feeding the baby sheep, now we're looking after the older sheep. But Jesus doesn't just end there. He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Now, Peter was grieved with him because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" Now, this is kind of getting a bit much, don't you think? 3 times? But remember, how many times did Peter deny Jesus? 3. This might be why he asked him 3 times, because of that trifold denial. It says here that Peter was grieved because Jesus asked him a 3rd time. Aside from the 3 denials, though, is it possible that he's had to ask him 3 times because he hasn't gotten a clear answer yet? Now, when Abby tells me I love you, the first thought that goes through my head is I know. Maybe I should say the second thought, because the first thought would probably be, why in the world would you do that? But then the second thought is I know. I've been telling her that for a while, and it's simple, because I can see that she loves me. I know that she loves me. It's not because she just said it, but it's because, last night we had I wasn't home last night. Me and Archer were away, but the night before we had a good home-cooked meal, all right? Because she came up to me and gave me a hug. Maybe she rubbed my neck when it was hurting. Maybe she surprised me with a cup of coffee or something like that. I could go on and on and on. It's easy to see why I love her. Wouldn't you agree? Now, I know that she loves me because of the actions that she shows, time and time again. There's no doubt in my mind. I still wonder why, but it is pretty obvious that she does. Peter, on the other hand, 3 times, just by his words, he's proven that he doesn't love Jesus. And 2, by his actions, right? They said, if you know him, basically come on in, be with him. And he said no and walked away. So it's not just his words, but his actions as well. That isn't sacrificial, is it? So Jesus asked him that 3rd time, do you love me? Now, do you remember what word Jesus used the first 2 times when he asked this? Agape, right? He said, do you love me sacrificially, unconditionally? But Peter deflected, right? Because he's kind of being honest. He says, I love you like a brother. Do you know what Jesus asked him this time, though? He doesn't say, do you love me agape? Do you love me unconditionally? He says, do you love me like a brother? That was kind of a low hit to Peter, I would think. It was very honest, but stop and think about it. Peter had just twice reaffirmed his love for Jesus in a brotherly way, yet Jesus kind of brings up a good point when he asks him, because Peter really didn't love him like a brother either, did he? He really didn't. When push came to shove, he wasn't there for him unconditionally. He wasn't there for him like a brother. It was kind of a little hard to see that Peter actually loved Jesus like a brother or sacrificially. Do brothers deny each other 3 times? Not ones that have good relationships, huh? So Peter replies, he says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Now, if this was me in Jesus' shoes, I would have said, yeah, I know everything, and you're a pretty terrible friend. Nobody's going to disagree with that. Because Peter, he's still referring to that love as brotherly love. He is. He says, Lord, you know I love you like a brother. Yet Jesus still, once again, increases his responsibility. See, Jesus was in the ministry of reconciliation. That's what he did. That's what he did when he died on the cross. He reconciled for our benefit a debt we could never pay. That's literally what that means, reconciliation. And when you're reconciling, some concessions have to be given. So even though Peter doesn't deserve it, even though he hasn't yet outright said, yes, I love you in an agape way, Jesus still says to him, feed my sheep. But But he doesn't stop there by just reinstating poor, dejected Peter. But he goes on to further prophesy about his death, which sounds kind of morbid, I know. But Jesus is really clarifying Peter's claim that he does indeed know all. In his mind, he's probably thinking, you love me like a brother, Peter. You really do love me sacrificially. Maybe you haven't done it yet, but you will. And he goes on to tell Peter how he knows. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. Well, just moments ago, when Peter had realized that it was Jesus that was shouting from the shore, John says that he stood up and he fastened his cloak around him and then jumped out of the boat. And that's why Jesus is drawing attention to that. He says, moments ago, you're young, you dressed yourself, but something else is going to happen to you. When you're old, you'll stretch out your hands, and another will dress you, and they'll carry you where you do not want to go. The opposite of what just happened is going to occur. What was Jesus foretelling here? Peter's crucifixion. That's what he was telling him. The Bible doesn't mention to us how Peter dies. But other sources have recorded by a number of authors that Peter was crucified in Rome and that he was crucified upside down because, in his own words, he didn't deserve to die like Jesus. That was under Emperor Nero, who we know loved fire. So it's also believed that at some point he was ignited, possibly while he was still on that cross alive. That was what Jesus was foretelling. Then he said to show by, this he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. If anybody wants to be my disciples, he must take up his cross and follow me. That's what Jesus was telling Peter was going to happen in his life, right? He was meaning literally follow me as we go on this mission ministering to people, but he was also meaning in death, follow me. You're going to be executed on a cross like me. Do you remember that passage where Jesus said, whoever comes after me, take up their cross and follow me? Do you remember when Jesus said that? He had said that right after him and Peter had had a conversation where Jesus asked him, who do you say that I am? He said that after Peter had confessed that Jesus was indeed the Messiah. And that's when Jesus goes on to warn him and all of the others about the cost of following him. Jesus told his disciples, he said, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? There's a ton we could get into in that passage, but that's not our focus, and we don't have the time for it this morning. But do we do that? Do we truly deny ourselves? Don't worry about the cross part yet. We're not there. Do we deny ourselves? That's probably the easiest part of that, isn't it? Denying ourselves. Just take a look at our culture today. Culture as a whole. Is it a culture that denies itself? No. You look at the church as a whole. Not just this here, but as a whole. Does the church deny itself? Someone's getting denied in church, but it's not ourselves, is it? Jesus' final command for Peter that day was really an invite for us all. He says, if you want to be followers of me, here's what you got to do. It's not an option. He didn't say, hey, here's what you could do. This is an option. Nope. He said, this is what must occur. Many churches today give a prosperity gospel, and it's pretty simple. It sells. It's real easy to get takers if you say, hey, you follow Jesus, life will improve, you're going to have a better life, you're going to have more money, a better car or a home. But what does Jesus, now remember, Jesus, the guy that made everything, the guy who had just kicked death's rear end, what does he have to say about it? He doesn't say it's going to be easy to follow him. He says, deny yourself and then pick up your cross and follow me. That's the real prosperity gospel. He says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? The whole world, that's what mainstream Christianity today tries to promise you. You follow Jesus, you'll have all kinds of money and wealth and power and possessions. Nope, you're losing your soul. In that last verse there, verse 19, John writes that Jesus had foretold Peter's method of death. As we close here this morning, I don't want to sound morbid, but I do want us to think about it, and I have to ask, if Jesus foretold our own death today, what would he say? As I said, I know it's kind of borderline morbid, and we don't need all the details, but seriously, think about it. Would he be able to say something like Peter's? Would he be able to say that we died in the service and in the footsteps of Jesus? Or would our prophecy be, in another way, much sadder? He died going to church every Sunday and never telling people about me. He died by passing people that needed help on the street. She died by not telling her loved ones about me. I don't know about you, but that's not the prophecy I'd want Jesus to say about me. I'd want him to say he died doing what I had commanded him to do. Would you close in prayer with me? Lord, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for your message. We thank you for your words recorded all those years ago, yet they're so true today. Lord, I know it's hard to think about, but as we look at how Jesus prophesied Peter's death, I just ask that it brings things into focus for us, that we too need to spend our living moments fulfilling the commission that you put out for us, to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow you to any extent. Lord, would you give us opportunities today to be your hands and feet in our communities. In your name we pray. Amen.